the frozen waters of the Arctic, where ice meets ocean and survival hung by the thinnest of threads, the Inuit peoples spoke of a powerful goddess who dwelled in the depths below. Her name was Sedna, also known as Sana, Arnaquagsak, or Nuliajuk, depending on which Inuit community told her tale. She was the mistress of all sea creatures, the keeper of seals, walruses, and whales, and perhaps the most feared and revered deity in the Inuit pantheon. Before we dive into the depths of Sedna's story, if you find value in these explorations of world mythology, please consider subscribing to the channel and following along. Your support helps us continue bringing these ancient stories to light. Sedna's tale was not one of glory and triumph, but of tragedy, transformation, and terrible power. Unlike many goddesses of the sea in other mythologies, Sedna did not choose her dominion. It was thrust upon her through betrayal and violence. Yet from that suffering emerged one of the most complex and influential deities in Arctic cosmology. According to the traditions recorded among various Inuit groups, Sedna began her existence as a human woman, the daughter of a prominent hunter whose name varied in different tellings. Some called him Anguta, while others left him unnamed. What remained consistent across nearly all versions was that Sedna possessed extraordinary beauty, a trait that would ultimately lead to her doom. The most complete early recording of Sedna's myth came from Franz Boas, who documented Inuit traditions during his time among the Central Arctic peoples in the late 19th century. In her youth, Sedna was known for her vanity and pride. Despite numerous suitors from her own community, she refused all offers of marriage, finding each man unworthy of her beauty. Her father grew increasingly frustrated with her rejections, as marriage alliances were crucial for survival in the harsh Arctic environment. The tension between father and daughter grew with each passing season, until one day a stranger arrived. Different versions of the myth presented this suitor in various forms. In some tellings, he appeared as a handsome hunter from a distant community, dressed in fine furs that concealed his true nature. In other versions, he was explicitly identified as a fulmar, a seabird, who had taken human form, or in some accounts, a raven or petrel. The stranger promised Sedna a life of comfort and abundance, with a tent made of the finest skins and an endless supply of food. Sedna, swayed by these promises, or perhaps coerced by her exasperated father, finally agreed to marriage and departed with the stranger to his distant home. But upon arriving at his land, the terrible truth revealed itself. Her husband was indeed a bird spirit in disguise, and the promised paradise was nothing but a barren, rocky island exposed to the harsh elements. Her tent was made of fish skins that let in the cold wind, and her food consisted of raw fish that the bird husband would regurgitate for her. Sedna found herself trapped in a nightmare of deception, crying out across the waters for deliverance. When summer came and the ice broke, Sedna's father traveled across the waters to visit his daughter. Upon witnessing her misery, he was overcome with remorse for forcing the marriage. In most versions, the father killed Sedna's bird husband in revenge, though the method varied, sometimes with a harpoon, sometimes with a knife, sometimes simply driving him away. Quickly, the father bundled Sedna into his kayak and began paddling desperately back toward their homeland. But the bird husband's spirit, or in some versions his bird kin, discovered the murder. A great storm arose, whether through the supernatural rage of the bird spirits or their physical efforts, the accounts differ. The birds flew above the kayak, creating such powerful winds with their wings that massive waves threatened to capsize the small vessel. The father, watching the towering waves approach and fearing for his own life, made a choice that would echo through Inuit tradition forever. He pushed his own daughter overboard. Sedna, struggling in the freezing Arctic waters, managed to grasp the edge of the kayak, her fingers desperately clinging to the side. But her father, in his terror and selfishness, took his knife and cut off her fingers at the first joints. As Sedna's severed fingertips fell into the ocean, they transformed immediately into seals, the ringed seals that would become essential to Inuit survival. Still, Sedna would not let go. She gripped the kayak with the remaining portions of her fingers, and again her father brought down the knife, severing them at the second joints. These pieces became bearded seals, larger and more powerful than the first. In the most complete versions, Sedna made one final attempt, clinging with her stumps, and her father cut off her hands at the wrists. These final pieces transformed into walruses, the largest pinnipeds of the Arctic. Some versions added that her arms themselves became whales when severed. Unable to hold on any longer, Sedna sank beneath the waves. But she did not die. Instead, she descended to the bottom of the ocean, to a place the Inuit called Adlevan, the underworld beneath the sea. There, she established her dwelling, which was described as a great house with an entrance guarded by fierce dogs. From this realm, Sedna became the mistress of all marine animals. In some traditions, Sedna's father was also dragged down to the depths, either by Sedna herself in revenge or by the weight of his guilt. He became her unwilling servant in her underwater realm, though his role varied in different accounts. As the mistress of the sea, Sedna wielded enormous power over the Inuit way of life. Since the Inuit depended almost entirely on marine mammals for their survival, providing food, clothing, fuel, and tools, Sedna essentially controlled their fate. Her powers were both creative and destructive, nurturing and wrathful. Sedna possessed dominion over all creatures of the sea. The seals, walruses, whales, and fish all belonged to her, born from her severed fingers and limbs. She could release these animals to hunters when pleased, allowing communities to thrive. But when angered, she could withhold the sea creatures entirely, condemning entire communities to starvation. This power made her arguably the most important deity in practical Inuit life, more immediately relevant than even the supreme sky god in some traditions. Her appearance in the underwater realm was described consistently across regions. Sedna had no fingers, only stumps where her father had severed them. Her hair was long and wild, constantly becoming tangled and matted because she could not comb it herself. This detail became crucial to understanding her relationship with humanity, as we shall see. Sedna's anger was legendary and multifaceted. She became enraged when humans broke taboos, particularly those concerning the treatment of game animals. If hunters failed to perform proper rituals after a kill, if they wasted meat, if they mixed land and sea animals improperly, or if they violated any of the countless rules governing the relationship between humans and animals, Sedna would know. Her rage manifested as storms preventing hunting, or she would simply keep the sea creatures confined in her hair or her house, refusing to release them. Unlike many deities in world mythology, Sedna possessed no spouse in the traditional sense. Her brief marriage to the bird spirit ended in his death. She had no children, though in a profound way, all sea creatures were her children, born of her body. This made her both mother and mistress of the ocean realm, nurturing and terrible in equal measure. Some versions mention that Sedna could leave her underwater realm during storms, swimming through the depths as a terrifying figure. Hunters claim to have seen her form in the waves during particularly violent tempests, her long hair streaming behind her, her fingerless hands reaching upward. These sightings were considered extremely unlucky and were met with immediate propitiation rituals. The goddess also possessed a deep, eternal sadness beneath her rage. The Inuit recognized that Sedna's anger stemmed from the betrayal she suffered. She was not evil by nature, but had been transformed into a wrathful being by the cruelty inflicted upon her. This understanding created a complex relationship between the goddess and her worshippers. They feared her, yes, but they also recognized the injustice that created her. When Sedna withheld the sea animals and famine threatened a community, the people turned to their Angakwit, their shamans. Only these spiritual specialists possessed the knowledge and power to journey to Sedna's underwater realm and attempt to placate her rage. This shamanic journey was considered one of the most dangerous undertakings in Inuit spiritual practice. The ritual typically began with the shaman entering a trance state, often in a darkened dwelling with the community gathered around. The shaman's soul, or free soul, as it was sometimes called, would separate from the body and begin the perilous descent to Adlevan. Various accounts describe the obstacles the shaman faced on this journey. First, the shaman's spirit had to cross a narrow bridge or navigate a spinning ice wheel, Some versions described a chasm that had to be crossed, with the bridge no wider than a knife's edge. One false step would cast the shaman's soul into an abyss from which there was no return. Next came Sedna's guardian dogs, fierce and ever watchful. The shaman had to use spiritual power and proper knowledge to slip past these creatures. Different shamans employed different techniques. Some spoke special words, others offered spiritual food, and some simply moved with such stealth that the dogs never noticed. Finally, the shaman reached Sedna's dwelling and entered. There, at the bottom of the ocean, sat the goddess, her hair a wild, tangled mass filled with the sins and taboo violations of humanity. This was the crucial moment. The shaman had to approach Sedna, often described as a terrifying figure with burning eyes and a frightening visage, and gently comb her hair. Because Sedna had no fingers, she could not tend to her own hair, and it became matted with the dirt and filth that represented human transgressions. The shaman would carefully comb out her hair, removing the tangles while speaking soothing words, listing the community's hardships, and sometimes confessing the violations that had occurred. As her hair was combed and the tangles removed, Sedna's rage would slowly diminish. When the goddess was finally calmed, she would release the sea animals from her house or from her hair, allowing them to swim back to the upper world where hunters could find them. The shaman would then make the dangerous journey back, navigating past the guardians and obstacles once more, and finally return to his body. The community would hear the shaman's description of the journey and Sedna's complaints. Often this led to communal confessions, where individuals would admit to taboo violations. The Inuit understood that Sedna's anger was not arbitrary. It was a response to their own failures to maintain proper relationships with the natural world. The relationship between the Inuit and Sedna was governed by an extensive system of taboos and prohibitions. These rules, while varying somewhat between different Inuit groups, shared common themes that reflected a deep understanding of the interconnection between human behavior and the natural world. Marine mammals required specific treatment after being killed. When a seal was brought up through an ice hole, many communities required that fresh water be given to it, a ritual that honored the animal's spirit and acknowledged that it had given its life willingly. Failure to provide this water was an offense to Sedna, who would learn of the disrespect through the animal's spirit. Women faced particular restrictions, especially during menstruation and childbirth. These periods were considered times of spiritual danger, and women had to observe strict separation from hunting equipment and certain foods. If a menstruating woman touched hunting tools, for instance, those tools would become spiritually contaminated, and any animals hunted with them would report the violation to Sedna. The mixing of land and sea animals was strictly forbidden in many communities. Caribou meat could not be cooked in the same pot as seal meat, and in some regions, caribou skins could not be sewn during the seal hunting season. These prohibitions reflected a cosmic order that Sedna enforced. The realms of land and sea had to remain distinct. Waste was perhaps the gravest offense. Every part of a killed animal had to be used respectfully. Discarding edible meat, leaving useful bones to rot, or showing disrespect to animal remains would infuriate Sedna. The Inuit understood that the animals belonged to Sedna, and she merely allowed them to be hunted. Some communities maintained prohibitions on specific activities during certain seasons. Singing certain songs, playing certain games, or performing certain dances could only happen at prescribed times. Violating these temporal boundaries would tangle Sedna's hair with spiritual transgressions. Beyond the central transformation myth, various legends associated with Sedna circulated among different Inuit groups, each revealing different aspects of her character and power. One legend told of a time when Sedna's father, condemned to serve her in the underwater realm, attempted to escape. He managed to reach the surface during a violent storm, but Sedna pursued him, creating waves that crashed over his kayak. Just as he neared land, Sedna caught him and dragged him back down, and since that time, some Inuit avoided traveling during certain storms, believing them to be manifestations of this eternal chase. Another tradition held that Sedna sometimes sent messages to the surface world through the movements of sea ice. Shamans who possessed the gift of interpretation could read these messages, understanding Sedna's moods and demands through the patterns of ice formation and breakup. Some coastal communities told of hunters who, during desperate times, claimed to have seen Sedna's face in the ice or water. These visions were both blessing and curse. They indicated that Sedna was watching, that she knew the community's suffering, but also that she had not yet chosen to release the animals. Such sightings required immediate shamanic intervention. In certain traditions from the Eastern Arctic, Sedna had the power to control not just the presence of sea animals, but their very movements and behaviors. She could make seals avoid certain hunting grounds, cause whales to swim far from shore, or direct walruses to beaches where they could be more easily hunted. This fine-grained control over animal behavior made her even more crucial to daily survival. A particularly poignant legend, recorded in several variations, described how Sedna would sometimes weep in her underwater realm. When she wept, her tears would rise through the ocean and manifest as particularly fierce storms or unusual ice conditions. These storms were seen as expressions of her eternal sorrow, reminders that beneath her anger lay the pain of ultimate betrayal. During such times, shamans would not attempt to journey to her realm, recognizing that her grief was too deep for comforting, and communities would simply have to endure until her sadness passed. Despite her tremendous power, Sedna possessed vulnerabilities that were well understood in Inuit tradition. Her primary weakness was her lack of fingers. The very source of her power over sea creatures was also her greatest limitation. She could not tend to herself, could not care for her own hair, and this dependency created a point of access for shamans and, by extension, for humanity. This weakness was not accidental, but deeply meaningful. It suggested that even the most powerful beings required connection and care from others. Sedna's rage could be soothed, her anger could be managed, but only through the intimate act of grooming, an act of care that she could not perform for herself. This made her simultaneously powerful and dependent, wrathful and needy. Her emotional wounds remained raw throughout eternity. Unlike deities who transcended their origins, Sedna carried her trauma with her always. The betrayal by her father, the deception of her husband, the horror of her transformation. These experiences shaped every aspect of her being. In this sense, her greatest weakness was her inability to heal, to move beyond the suffering that created her. This emotional vulnerability made her unpredictable. She could be placated temporarily, but the underlying rage and sorrow never truly dissipated. Sedna also could not leave her underwater realm for extended periods, according to most traditions. While she might manifest during storms or appear briefly in visions, she remained bound to Adlivun, unable to walk upon land or fully engage with the upper world. This confinement was both her power base and her prison. Additionally, Sedna's anger, while terrible, was not arbitrary or capricious. It followed rules and responded to proper propitiation. This predictability, if one could call it that, meant that knowledgeable shamans could, with skill and bravery, manage the relationship between humanity and the goddess. Her power had limits imposed by cosmic order, even as she enforced that same order upon humans. Why did the Inuit remember and revere Sedna above nearly all other supernatural beings? The answer lay in the harsh realities of Arctic existence and the profound psychological truths embedded in her myth. On the practical level, Sedna controlled access to the primary food source for many Inuit communities. In an environment where agriculture was impossible and land game could be scarce, marine mammals meant the difference between life and death. A successful seal hunt could feed a family for weeks. A season without seals meant starvation. This immediate visceral connection between Sedna's favor and human survival made her the most relevant deity in daily life. But Sedna's significance went deeper than mere practicality. Her myth encoded crucial ecological wisdom. The taboos she enforced, treating animals respectfully, using all parts of a kill, maintaining proper relationships with nature, were not arbitrary rules but survival strategies that had developed over millennia. By attributing these rules to a powerful deity who would punish violations, Inuit society ensured that sustainable hunting practices were maintained. Psychologically, Sedna represented something profound about trauma, anger, and the burden of suffering. She was not a goddess who had always been divine, not a figure of distant perfection. She was a being who had suffered terrible wrong, who carried that suffering with her, and whose pain affected everyone around her. This made her deeply human, even in her supernatural power. The Inuit could understand her rage because they understood betrayal and loss. Her myth also served as a powerful reminder about the consequences of breaking social bonds. Sedna's father had valued his own life over his daughter's, and that betrayal rippled outward, affecting not just the two of them, but all of humanity forever after. The story warned against selfishness, against putting one's own survival above family bonds, against the breaking of trust. For women, particularly, Sedna's story held complex meanings. She was both victim and power, suffering and strength. While her transformation came through violence and betrayal, she emerged from that experience as the most powerful figure in the spiritual ecosystem. She was not defined solely by what was done to her, but by what she became afterward. Shamans, the spiritual specialists of Inuit society, found in Sedna both their greatest challenge and their most important function. The journey to her realm demonstrated their power and their service to the community. Successfully placating Sedna proved a shaman's abilities and validated their position in society. In this way, Sedna's existence and nature helped structure Inuit spiritual practice and social organization. The story of Sedna, goddess of the sea, was far more than a simple myth for the Inuit peoples. It was a living tradition that shaped their relationship with the ocean, with animals, with each other, and with the spiritual forces that governed their world. Born from human suffering and betrayal, transformed into a being of tremendous power, dwelling in the depths where light barely reaches, Sedna embodied the harsh truths of Arctic existence. Survival required respect for nature, community required maintenance of social bonds, and power often emerged from suffering. Her fingerless hands, once a symbol of her powerlessness, became the source of all marine life. Her anger, while fearsome, could be soothed by acts of care and the acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Her eternal isolation in the underwater realm made her both remote and immediate, distant in space, but present in every seal that surfaced, every walrus that hauled onto ice, every whale that spouted in the distance. The Inuit told Sedna's story not to glorify violence or to justify suffering, but to acknowledge the complex realities of their world. They recognized that the goddess who fed them was also a being of profound pain, that their survival depended on the grace of one who had every reason to hate humanity, and that maintaining proper relationships with nature, with each other, with the spiritual world, was not optional, but essential. Thank you for joining us in exploring the depths of Sedna's story. If you found this journey into Inuit mythology meaningful, please share it with others who might appreciate these ancient traditions. Join us again as we continue exploring the rich tapestry of world mythology, one story at a time. Until then, may you remember that every action ripples outward, touching worlds both seen and unseen.